I have any questions for Kotha? Okay, our next presentation will be Sister Aisha Makaran. Aisha, you can present.
Jazakallah. 1 second. Sorry, 1 second. I'm gonna. Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Aisha Makaran, and I'm going to be presenting the immigrations of the Sahaba. First of all, why did the Muslims immigrate? They immigrated to Abyssinia because the Quraysh were growing more and more violent, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ agreed and allowed this immigration to Abyssinia because he knew that the king was fair and wouldn't put the Muslims in any danger like the Quraysh did. The first group of Muslims that immigrated to Abyssinia left on the month of Rajab, 5th year of the prophethood, and there were 12 men and 4 women. And in this group, Uthman bin Affan and his wife Ruqayya, which was the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, were the most prominent, and they were also the first people to immigrate for the sake of Allah after Ibrahim and Lut alayhi salam. What did the Quraysh do in response to this? After they heard the Muslims left Abyssinia, they sent their men after them, but then they weren't able to capture any of the Muslims. And when the Muslims arrived in Abyssinia, they were greeted warmly and with open arms. The second group of Muslims that immigrated to Abyssinia left the same year as the first, but this time there were 83 and 18 women, so even more than the first group. And the most prominent companion in this group is Ja'far bin Abi Talib. What did the Quraysh do in response to this? After the Quraysh sent 2 envoys, Amr bin al-As and Abdullah bin Rabia, to Abyssinia, and they sent gifts with the envoys for the king and demanded that the Muslims be banned from Abyssinia and handed over to the Quraysh because Abyssinia gave up the religion of their forefathers. How did the king respond to this? The king responded by bringing the Muslims to court and asking them to explain themselves. And so Ja'far bin Abi Talib was the one who spoke on behalf of the Muslims. Now about Ja'far bin Abi Talib, he was the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the brother of Ali bin Abi Talib. And he gave the speech to the king and said that Islam calls the people to believe in only Allah and forbids Muslims from associating partners with Allah and worshipping idols. He also said that Islam urges them to speak the truth and to always think of the rights of our relatives and neighbors. He said that Islam prevents Muslims from doing anything wrong and orders Muslims to pray and give to the poor. What was the reason for immigration that he told the king? Ja'far bin Abi Talib told the king that the Muslims embraced Islam and the Quraysh did not like this, so they started to turn against the Muslims and wanted them to abandon Islam and return to worshipping idols. So the Muslims all refused and the Quraysh started torturing them. He said that the Muslims had no safety with the Quraysh, so they came to the king's country in hopes of living in peace under his protection. What was the king's reaction to this? The king was very impressed with this speech and asked Ja'far to recite some verses from the Quran. So Ja'far decided to recite the opening verses from Surah Maryam. The king loved it and returned all the gifts back to the envoys of Quraysh and told the envoys that he couldn't give them back the refugees because the Muslims were free to live and worship in his kingdom as they please. What happened the next day? The two envoys went to the king and said that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his followers didn't believe that Isa was the son of God. So the king called the Muslims back to him to ask them what they thought and their point of view. Ja'far spoke for the Muslims again and said that the Muslims speak of Isa the way that and respect them the way that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught them, and they believe that Isa was the servant of Allah. How did the king reply to this? The king replied by saying that him and his people also believe the same, and so he assured the Muslims that they have full protection under him, and so he returned the gifts he received back to the envoys, and the Muslims lived in Abyssinia in peace for 2 years, but then returned back to Medina on the occasion of Khaybar. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for listening to my presentation. That is it. Do you have any questions?
Abdulwahid.
What were the gifts that the envoys gave to the king?
There were mostly gifts that the king would enjoy so that the king would give them back, the Muslims. So probably like wealthy things.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Aisha, for the presentation and for answering the question. Our last student who will be presenting today is Sister Sumaya Mahmood. Sumaya, you can